Dr. Naseer Aruri, first I would like to thank you for flying in from Massachusetts in solidarity with your friend Mansour. Dr. Aruri needs no recognition. Born in Jerusalem, a professor at University of Massachusetts, author of several books and articles on human rights, a member of the board of Amnesty International in USA, 1984-1990, a member of the board of Middle East Watch, 1990-92, a founding member of Arab Organization for Human Rights, a long-time friend of Mansour Kikhia, a true human rights activist. It is my pleasure and honor, ladies and gentlemen, to present Dr. Naseer Aruri.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Houni. We are assembled here tonight to renew our commitment to Mansour Kikhia and to send a message to those who are responsible for the abduction of Mansour and to those who are responsible for his disappearance, to those who refuse to divulge information that may shed some light on what has been declared a mystery. Mansour, this gentle, decent human being, this honest, sincere, committed person, this cosmopolitan, sophisticated intellectual, yet simple, down-to-earth human rights activist, was abducted at the very time when he was promoting the cause of human rights. We owe it to ourselves to plead Mansour's case, for he was defending values and principles which many of us hold dear. He is a man who devoted his entire life to the cause of liberation. Liberation from settler colonialism in Algeria and in Palestine. Liberation from reactionary rule in monarchical Yemen. Liberation from corrupt dictatorships in the Arab world. Mansour has devoted the past decade and a half in the pan-Arab struggle for democracy and human rights. Undoubtedly, that cost him his own human rights, for human rights activists were always at risk. They are a favorite target of the insecurity forces. Mansour is a dissident, but the environment in which he struggled is inhospitable to dissidents. His dissidency got him in trouble not only with the Libyan government, but with other forces in the Arab world who make no distinction between dissent and treason. Mansour's commitment to democratic forms of government has clashed head-on with autocratic forms of government. The Arab world is unfortunately well endowed with autocracies, irrespective of the type of government in the Arab world, pro-West or anti-West, conservative or presumed progressive, monarchical or republican, secular or fundamentalist. Irrespective of all these dichotomies, the region is truly a disaster area in terms of human rights. And this is the real context for the disappearance of Mansour and other dissidents. I will give you just a few examples to illustrate this fact about human rights conditions in the Arab world. Both Mansour and I were involved in the establishment and development of the Arab Organization for Human Rights. So was also Dr. Halim Barakat and Dr. Hisham Sharabi, who are with us here tonight. The first episode relates to the very establishment of this organization, which was planned in Hammamat, Tunis in April 1983. But the actual founding had to take place in Limassol, Cyprus, because no Arab capital would host such an assembly. Ironically, the founding was in December 1983, 10 years before Mansour's disappearance. The second episode, which testifies to Arab government hostility to human rights, took place in December 1986, when Mubarak's government abruptly cancelled a scheduled general meeting of the organization in Cairo, only 1 week prior to the time of the meeting. The meeting was held instead in Khartoum at the invitation of a democratic leader who did not last long as prime minister. That was Sadiq al-Mahdi, an intellectual Democrat, which is a rare commodity in the Arab world these days. The third episode, also affecting the same organization for which Mansour has worked and struggled, and that is the organization, the Arab Organization for Human Rights. Our first attempt to obtain a consultative status with the UN as an NGO was foiled by a rare show of unity when strange bedfellows representing 5 Arab governments joined forces at the UN to oppose the organization's bid. They succeeded during the first round. It was an expression of Arab unity, but on the wrong issue. It is no surprise, therefore, that this troubled relationship between civil society and government in the Arab world, the civil and the uncivil, would culminate in this violence against one of the most prominent, thoughtful, and truly effective leaders in the democratic opposition in the Arab world. Such acts, however, on the part of repressive governments must not be allowed to pass without a challenge. While we do not point our finger at anyone, while we do not accuse anyone in particular, we have numerous questions to raise, many of which have already been raised. But in the absence of real answers, we must raise them again and again and again. They are simple questions which have to do with law enforcement, and none of them are beyond the capabilities of the security-minded governments, whether it is the Libyan government, the Egyptian government, or our own government here in the United States. Mansour is a Libyan national, but he is a US resident who was due to be granted US citizenship and therefore entitled to the rights of American nationals. He disappeared in Egypt, a country which granted him a visa and safe passage, and which hosted the conference, screened the conferees, kept tabs on their movements in Egypt, and maintained permanent surveillance on Libyan dissidents in the country. It would be sheer folly to believe that Egypt has no answers to this mystery. In fact, Egypt has answers which are essential to the process of locating Mansour Kikhia. And these answers must be supplied to avoid what is called an obstruction of justice. Why did Egypt deny him a visa and later suddenly changed and expedited his trip? How could President Mubarak reconcile his denial of knowing anything about Mansour's whereabouts with the documented evidence about his security forces' surveillance? In a country where even hotel telephone operators must record every message that comes to the hotel, where every caller and telephone number, and where doormen are required to take down registration numbers for all cars parked in the vicinity, where dissidents are routinely interrogated and information kept, there can be no excuse for pleading ignorance. It is a well-known fact that Mansour was driven across the Libyan border in a car belonging to a Libyan official, and that the Egyptian Division of Criminal Investigation has reports of these movements. Why do these reports remain suppressed, we ask? The US government also bears a big responsibility as well. Egypt is the recipient of 6% of total US foreign aid. Mansour is a US resident who was abducted in Egypt, which had granted him safe passage. It is Egypt's obligation to the US to report everything it knows about Mansour. Otherwise, it would stand accused of covering up. It is also the US government obligation to Mansour and to his family and to all US taxpayers to do everything in its power to locate Mansour and to secure his release. Otherwise, it would be applying a double standard. Human rights must not be utilized as an instrument of foreign policy to realize strategic gains and to selectively punish and reward in pursuit of a declared national interest. The safety and welfare of Mansour Kikhia are not less important than the lives of the Lockerbie victims, and yet the entire Libyan nation is being unfairly subjected to collective punishment because of Lockerbie. We are not seeking additional punishment for Libya. We are seeking protection and safety for Mansour. He is certainly entitled to that basic right, and the Clinton administration is obligated to uphold that right and to effect that right. Only Washington can persuade Egypt these days to release the information in its possession. It has the capability, but it must also develop the will. I am glad that a top official in the administration is with us tonight. I was privileged to have served with John Shattuck on the board of directors of Amnesty International a few years ago. I know about John's commitment to human rights firsthand. His presence with us tonight provides eloquent testimony to his sincere concern about human rights and the rights of the disappeared. We appeal to him to do his best in obtaining the release of information that is so vital for putting an end to the plight of Mansour Kikhia and his family. And we appeal to you, the audience in this room, to renew your commitment on behalf of Mansour, on behalf of human rights. Thank you very much.